Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Eliphas Levi. This is Dogma and Ritual of Transcendental Magic. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of me and why I say the things that I do. Of particular note, today is going to be the standalone video, The Fundamental Harmonics of Life. We will get to that. But now that that has been said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of Dogma and Ritual with Chapter 6, Magical Equilibrium. Tifereth Uncus. Supreme intelligence is necessarily reasonable. God, in philosophy, may be only a hypothesis, but he is a hypothesis imposed by good sense on human reason. To personify the absolute reason is to determine the divine ideal. Necessity, liberty, and reason. These are the great and supreme triangle of the Kabbalists, who name reason Kether, necessity Kokma, and liberty Bina in their first divine triad. Fatality, will, and power, such as the magical triad, which corresponds in things human to the divine triad. Fatality is the inevitable sequence of events and causes in a determined order. Will is the directing faculty of intelligent forces for the conciliation of the liberty of persons with the necessity of things. Power is the wise application which will enlist fatality itself in the accomplishment of the desires of the sage. Right, so power is neutral, it is not wise. Right? Power has no capacity on its own. Power is something that you apply, and you can apply power judiciously, that is true. But you can apply power injudiciously. Injustices do happen from people in power. Power is neutral. It is a tool. It can be used in any way which you choose. Now, will is the directing faculty of intelligent forces, right? Your decisions are your will. The things that I choose is my will. And so, yes, it is the directing faculty. Fatality, the inevitable sequence of events and causes in a determined order, is completely against the idea of free will, right? And so if you hold that fatality is the thing, then this is not going to be the study for you, right? You do have liberty. You do have the power to choose. You do get to suffer for the choices of your consequences or receive the blessings thereof. That is a true thing. It is not determined that you will absolutely walk this particular line for the entirety of your life. As we explained yesterday, God has taken into account all of the possible decisions that you could possibly make. Every single one of them has an outcome. You get to choose which one of them you actually want, right? You get to choose whether you're going to have toast or eggs, juice or coffee. Those are choices. Either way that you choose, there is a path that continues on from that. Now, there are more important choices. What your job's going to be, who your spouse is going to be, how you're going to raise your kids. All of those are choices. You are free to make them. It is not predetermined how that is going to play out. You make those decisions. You are here for the experience, and part of that experience is the ability to make those choices. So this fatality, fuck you. Get away from me with that. And we have seen several times the Kabbalah is nothing to base a magical system upon. Right? I do things. I have accomplished things. I do not play with the Kabbalah at all. As a matter of fact, to me, it is doing things exactly the wrong way with the exact wrong motivations. And so, for me, it doesn't work. For me, it is victim mentality, just the exact same way that the entirety of the Jewish religion is, the same way that the Christian religion is, right? Putting upon something else the things you should be responsible for yourself. Well, it doesn't matter what decision I make, it's going to be this way anyway, is not true. It is absolutely not true. And I don't say that often. If you've been here for any period of time, the closest I ever get is almost certain, right? 99%. It is 100% certain you are making the decisions for your life, and you get to live with those decisions. You get to live with those consequences, good or bad. That is up to you. It is not fatality, right? Okay, so power is the wise application is wrong too. When Moses smote the rock, he did not create the spring of water. He revealed it to the people because occult science had made it known to himself by means of the divining rod. That is not what is relayed in that story. That is not what is relayed in that story. What is relayed in that story is God told him to smite the rock. He didn't say anything about a divining rod. Now, it is completely misunderstood what happened here, right? The only reason that he had to smite the rock is because they killed his sister because she disagreed, right? She was the water witch. She was the one providing the water. It was not until after the argument that Moses was dating a black chick, and then he got upset with her and Aaron, and there was a whole chain of consequences, and then his sister Miriam died. And then from that point forward, they couldn't get water, right? That's what happened. Then they come across the salty spring, and they got to toss the thing in there that changes it from salt to pure. Now, that's not to say that's impossible. It's highly unlikely, but it is not impossible. There are chemical reactions to take salt out. Entirely a possibility. We don't even have to know how it happened. The smiting of the stone with the rock, that's along the exact same lines, right? God led him to this pool, and somehow God brought him to a pool that had salt in it. And then God told him, go out here and give them water. And then when he claimed the water, it was the worst thing in the world. And he can't go into the promised land now. Like, he can go for the first part where they take over and kill this one whole group of people. But he can't be there for the other 10 groups of people that they eliminate from the face of the earth. He can't be there for that part. Now, if any of that is confusing to you, I suggest you roll back to Exodus. I have a whole Bible study that is linked in the corner above. It is called the Unconventional Bible Study because I read it without the glasses on of this has to be true, right? I didn't read it as the Israelites were the chosen people, or that someone had to die for you to be forgiven from sin. And it completely changed the entire context of the book. You should definitely check it out, right? If you are unfamiliar with my Bible study, it is a little bit different than anything else you will find. Back to the text. It is in like manner with all miracles and magic. A law exists which is ignored by the vulgar and made use of by the initiate. Occult laws are often diametrically opposed to common ideas. For example, the crowd believes in the sympathy of things which are alike, and the hostility of things contrary, but it is the opposite which is the true law. It used to be affirmed that nature detests the void, but it should be said that nature desires it. Were the void not, in physics, the most irrational of fictions? In all things, the vulgar mind habitually takes shadow for reality, turns its back upon light, and is reflected in the obscurity which it projects itself. The forces of nature are at the disposal of one who knows how to resist them. Are you, master, sufficiently of yourself to be never intoxicated? Right? Here is another one of those things, right? You should refrain from intoxication at times. But there are times for it, even on a daily level. If it is not a problem, right? If you are drinking a little bit of alcohol when you get off of work just to relax, not to forget your problems, not to glaze over some issue, but just to have a little bit of fun, to relax, listen to some music, and let your body wind down. There is nothing wrong with that, even every single day. Once you get to the point where you're thinking about that drink when you're at work, right? I cannot wait to get off to get this alcohol. Then that's a problem, right? And so, once again, moderation is the key to all things. You are supposed to assimilate the vices and the virtues, not to exclude them entirely. So you should be master sufficiently of yourself to refrain from getting intoxicated on occasion. But that does not mean that you can never get drunk. That does not mean that you can never smoke pot. That doesn't even mean that you can't do a little bit of toot juice every once in a while. But once again, most of those things are not good for you. We call it intoxicated because it's poisoning you. It's quite literally a poison. It will actually kill you. And so you should be exceedingly careful when you make use of these things. Back to the text. Are you master sufficiently of yourself to be never intoxicated? Then you will direct the terrible and fatal power of intoxication. If you would make others drunk, possess them with the desire of drink, but do not partake of it yourself. That man will dispose of the love of others, who is master of his own. If you would possess, do not give. The world is magnetized by the light of the sun, and we are magnetized by the astral light of the world. That which operates in the body of the planet repeats itself in us. Within us, there are 3 analogical and hierarchic worlds, as in all nature. I want to hit this real quick too, right? That man will dispose of the love of others, who is master of his own. If you would possess, do not give, is absolutely wrong. That is exactly the wrong idea to have, right? You get what you give out. The energy that you expend is the energy that will be returned, multiplied, measured, and shaken. The law of returns is real. Now, your motivation plays a large part of that, so you should not be giving with the expectation of return. But if you give, return will happen. Now, that counts whether it is good or bad that you are giving. If you are giving bad, it will come back to you, multiplied. If you are giving good, it will come back to you, multiplied. That is the law of response. It is quite literally an immutable law of creation. And so, if you would possess, give freely. If you would possess, give freely, with no expectation of return, with no expectation of gratitude or thanks or anything. Give freely, and you will possess. If you would dispose of the love of others, right? The man who is master of his own love can dispose of the love of others, is another reading of that. You should never dispose of love, right? You should be master of your love. That is a truth, right? We tend to give love without necessarily understanding whether that is good or not. Otherwise, nobody would ever have an ex, right? Nobody would ever get screwed over. You should be in possession of your faculties when you're entering into a relationship. You should look at their cons. Everybody has cons. If you are not seeing the bad side of someone, you are not looking hard enough, right? Everybody has flaws. You should make sure that the flaws of the person you are engaging with are flaws that you can actually deal with. But once again, give out what you would like to receive, because the world is magnetized, and like attracts like. All right, we are here. Man is the microcosm or little world, and according to the doctrine of analogies, whatsoever is in the great world is reproduced in the small. Hence, we have 3 centers of fluidic attraction and projection: the brain, the heart, or epigastric region, and the genital organ. That would be 4. Now, I hold some unconventional beliefs, and we are definitely going to get into this in the next one, but there are 7 internal chakras and 1 external, making a total of 8 that you have access to. And indeed, they can be broken into 3 centers. The sacral, or the base, the sacral, and the solar plexus, which would be the epigastric region and the genital organs, is 1. The crown, the third eye, and the throat is another one. The heart is another one, right? The heart is linked to the divine. You have the as below, which is the base, the sacral, and the solar plexus. You have the as above, which is the crown, the third eye, and the throat, right? As above, so below, melded, not melted, but melded through the heart, right? They come into unison through the heart, and that is how manifestation happens. We will be getting back into that when we get to the number 7 next, but this is in part right, because the as below, the epigastric region, you have to align and then move the energy into. So you have a center of fluidic attraction and projection right there. You have to move the energy through the upper into the heart. And again, you have a center of fluidic attraction and projection, right? Then there's a much deeper explanation to this. And so the main part of this being that, yes, there are 3 centers, right? You have the as above, as below, and the melding together. That is 3. That is a trinity. It is body, mind, and spirit. It is quite literally the trinity in action. There is, of course, a much greater explanation. It is contained in my book, which you can get at the link down below, or you can become a member here on YouTube, and you can get me to read it to you. Back to the text. Each of these instruments is double, or actually triplicate. In other words, we find the suggestion of the triad therein. Yeah, there is 3, 3, and 1, 2, right? Melding the 3 into the 1. And so there is a triplicate contained inside of the triad. Each attracts on one side and repels on another. It is by means of these apparatuses that we place ourselves in communication with the universal fluid transmitted into us by the nervous system. That is absolutely true. That is exactly how it works. Each of these attracts or repels according to how you have them aligned, and you are in charge of that. And we place ourselves in communication, right? That which you give out attracts that which you want. That is communication, aligning yourself and using the forces to go out and attract what you want, to take the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit, and to use them to gain the things that you are attracting into your life is communication with the universal fluid, which is the Spirit. These 3 centers are, moreover, the seat of the threefold magnetic operation, as we shall explain elsewhere. When the magus has attained lucidity, whether through the meditation of a Pythoness or by his own development, he communicates and directs at will the magnetic vibrations in the whole mass of the astral light. Whole mass is a big word, right? But you do absolutely take control and direct the magnetic vibrations in the things that I talk about, the currents of which he divines by means of the magic rod, which is a perfected divining rod. Now, here is the thing. I do not have a rod. I have a wand. I rarely use it. It's from the taproot off of a 200-year-old cypress tree. They uprooted it in a construction project, and I made a wand out of the taproot. So I have one. I have all kinds of tools on this shelf. I've got tools up here that I use. But you do not have to use any tool in order to direct, right? Magnetic vibrations in the hull of the astral light, that part is true. The currents which he divines by means of the magic rod is only the magic rod which would be your sacral to your, or your base to your crown, aligned and in communication with the divine. That would be the only way that the rod works. Now, that does not mean that you cannot use a wand, right? That is a foci. It is something that you use to enable you to be able to do things, right? Some of them have harmonics that are attached to them, and you can use that to clarify your energies, right? Those are tools. You can use them, but they have no power by themselves, and you do not have to have them in order to do any of the things that I talk about. Now, the things that are contained in this book, many of which I disagree with, they'll tell you that you need these things, right? You have to have a stone for this. You have to draw a pentagram for that. You have to have a wand for this. I do not believe that at all, any part of that. Those things can be helpful. They are tools, but you do not have to have any of them. Back to the text. By the aid of these vibrations, he influences the nervous system of persons surrendered to his action, accelerates or suspends the currents of life, soothes or tortures, heals or hurts, in fine, slays or brings to life. And here we have the warning. It is entirely possible to influence other people's lives. It is highly recommended to the point of almost 100%, right? Do not do anything without permission, without express, implicit permission. Now, there can be relationships where that is implicit, right? If you have discussed it, then you don't have to every single time be like, is it okay if I heal you? You know, you've already talked about this. This is already something that you do. But even to the point of healing, do not do anything to anyone without their express consent. 100% agreement with the things that you are doing. Otherwise, there will be repercussions, and those repercussions can be very, very severe. You should be extremely careful when you are directing any energy outside of yourself, and anything outside of consent is going to reverberate upon you in negative ways. Now, I don't like using other people's names, and I'm going to do it again because it is a great example. If you are familiar with Styx Hexenhammer 666, he has a channel where he does political discourse, but he also talks about the occult, and he has edited several ancient volumes into modernity, and he thought he had a good understanding of the occult, and so he attempted several things, right? He put hexes on people, he attempted doing ceremonial magic without the understanding of what he was doing, and he is suffering currently from the effects thereof. Now, he probably wouldn't look at it that way. I absolutely do, because I can see over here objectively what he did, because he told us, and the results, because he's telling us, right? He was trying to cast a spell to get out of legal trouble for some shit that he did. That is always going to be a bad idea. Casting a hex upon the prosecutor and the prosecution team and an entire city is stupid. Like, base level, you're a fucking idiot, stupid. Like, I do not know how somebody who can hold intelligent discourse would even attempt to do something like that. But he attempted ceremonial magic, and he's like, I accidentally cut myself. Like, that was not intrinsic to the ceremony. You may not have seen that. You may not understand that, but that accidentally cutting yourself was by no means an accident. You fed the beast with your blood, and now you are going to reap the rewards from that. Be very careful with the things that you do. Do not torture anyone. Do not hurt anyone. If you are doing those things, and you can, you have free will, but if you do those things, they absolutely 100% will reverberate at least by the power of 3. At least by the power of 3. At least by the power of 3. I said it 3 times. It is important. Back to the text. Here, however, we pause in the presence of the smile of incredulity. Let us permit it to enjoy the cheap triumph of denying what it does not know. We shall demonstrate later on that death is always preceded by a lethargic sleep, and only takes place gradually. That is not true either. I'm sorry, you must not have ever seen somebody die suddenly. Right? And by suddenly, I mean like immediate. Right? There was no lingering, there was no suffering, there was no breathing. It was that damn fast. Now, that does not mean that it is always that fast, but sometimes it is that fast. And you are making an assumption here. You are inserting something here to give greater weight to your words, and that is simply not cool. We'll put it that way. That resurrection is possible in certain cases. That, again, is a true thing, and again, something that is, you should be exceedingly careful. Right, it is entirely possible. I just had it, like, Jason left me a comment the other day, and thank you, Jason, about how it is possible to reanimate, even across distances, using the electromagnetic forces of creation. And once again, I will reiterate that while things are possible, that does not mean that they are good, that they're a good idea, right? It could be entirely within the plan and direction of the Lord God Almighty that you interfere with the death of another human being. But that is exceedingly unlikely. Exceedingly unlikely, even though you can alter the events. I did a video a long time ago, I don't even remember the full name of it, but it was about the unintended consequences of our actions. And what I did was I read the story of the monkey's paw, which is all about unintended consequences. Things that you think is going to go one way, and they turn and go in a completely different way. And it is because of free will. It is because you are interfering with something that you do not understand. You should never, ever interfere with things that you don't understand. That lethargy is a real but uncompleted death, and that the final paroxysm is in many cases subsequent to inhumation. This, however, is not the subject of the present chapter. We now affirm that a lucid will can act upon the mass of the astral light, and, in concurrence with other wills, which it absorbs and draws along, can determine great and irresistible currents. That is true, right? All the way through, right? We affirm that lucid will, that means the intentional use of these forces, can act upon the mass of the astral light. That is an absolute truth, right? Again, I do not say that lightly. Most of the time, I only will go to up to 99. I will go to 100 on this one too. You can move the astral light. The astral light is the spirit, right? You can manipulate that. I have healed myself using that. I have changed the weather doing that. Be careful, but you can. But also, in concurrence with other wills. That is true as well. If you are in accordance with other people, that is a multiplication factor. If two people are aligned with the same will, in the same direction, with the correct intentions, the result will be multiplied. If there are 3, that is another multiplication factor. If there are 10, that is a much greater multiplication factor. And so, yes, you can move the astral light in concurrence with other wills. All of that is a true thing. Which it absorbs and draws along is kind of right? The absorption, that's a little bit different, right? That would be the blending to the exclusion of separation, and that's not quite how it works. That is still the individuals coalescing the will, and so there are several streams. They are all going in the same way. They can even intermingle, but they are directed by those wills and are therefore not absorbed. They are, however, drawn along. You can have one person doing the direction. That's generally how it works. And that person can absolutely draw along that other energy. And can determine great and irresistible currents. Another one of those, yes, that is true. If you are unaware, I have taken responsibility for a great deal of our direction on this planet. Right? That sounds awfully heady, but I don't mean it that way. Right? There are nefarious forces, and some of those nefarious forces have taken it upon themselves to draw us in a certain direction because of this, in concurrence with other wills, right? The Illuminati type people, not saying that particular group, but that's one that's associated with the thoughts, right? They are acting in accordance. The thing is that good intentions outweigh negative intentions immensely, and one singular actor who takes it upon themselves to take responsibility for that direction can kind of throw a wrench into everybody else's designs. I have done that. I intentionally took direction of everybody who is not directly in control of their own. I have taken control to put us into a very general positive direction. I'm not saying that I am entirely the reason why these things in the current past have gone in the correct direction, but I am saying that I had a part to play at the very least. Things have unfolded, while not exactly how I asked for, exactly in the direction that I asked for. And I asked for peace, love, freedom, prosperity, and forgiveness for the entire planet every single day, and we can see those things happening. It may be a little bit blurry at times, but it is happening. And so you can determine great and irresistible currents. I have done so. And I know that sounds awfully heady, right? I am not micromanaging anyone else. It is a very, very general positive outcome. We also say that the astral light condenses or rarefies in proportion as currents accumulate, more or less, at certain centers. When it is deficient in the energy required for the support of life, diseases accompanied by sudden decomposition follow, of the kind which baffle physicians. There is not other cause, by example, in the case of cholera morbus, and the swarms of animalculae observed and supposed by some specialists may be the effect rather than the cause. Alright, so what he is talking about here is bacteria. And the bacteria would be the cause, not the effect. Now, that is not to say that you cannot prepare yourself in such a way that bacteria cannot thrive, or at least the negative bacteria, that you can do. But the bacteria are the cause for those sudden afflictions. Cholera should therefore be treated by insufflation, did not the operator thereby run the chance of an exchange with the patient, which would be very formidable for himself. I'm not familiar with this word. What is insufflation? I'm going to look this one up real quick, even though I normally do not do that in the middle. We're going to do this and see exactly what that means. The ritual act of breathing on baptismal water or on one being baptized. The breathing upon a person in the sacrament of baptism to symbolize the inspiration of a new spiritual life. Okay, so cholera should be treated by baptizing someone and breathing upon them. I'm going to go with a no on that. I'm going to go with that's probably not going to be the route to go. Right, you can direct the energies. That is true, but back to the text. Every intelligent effort of will is a projection of the human fluid or light, and here it is needful to distinguish the human from the astral light and animal from universal magnetism. In making use of the word fluid, we employ an accepted expression and would make ourselves understood in this manner, but we are far from deciding that the latent light is a fluid. Everything prompts us, on the contrary, to prefer the system of vibrations in the explanation of the phenomenal subject. However it may be, the light in question, being the instrument of life, cleaves naturally to all living centers, attaches itself to the nucleus of planets, even as to the heart of man, and by the heart we understand magically the great sympathetic, identifying itself with the individual life of the being which it animates, and it is by this quality of sympathetic assimilation that it distributes itself without confusion. Hence, it is terrestrial in its affinity with the sphere of the earth, and human exclusively in its affinity with men. That is making an assumption, right? You are assuming that animals cannot. That is not something that we do not know, or that is not something that we do know. You can make the assumption, that does not mean it is correct, right? The light cleaves naturally to all living centers, but it's only got an affinity with men, right? Exclusively in its affinity with men. No, I vehemently disagree with that. I believe that everything has its own light, all the way down to the smallest atom, right? You have individualized atoms of hydrogen and oxygen, right? They exist, they have propulsion within them, and when they meet, there is a flash of light and a new thing is formed, right? That is an elemental use of the plasma, the elemental forces of change. That's quite literally how nature works. And so this is not true. It is for this reason that electricity, caloric, light, and magnetism produced by ordinary physical means not only do not originate, but rather tend to neutralize the effects of animal magnetism. I don't know what he's talking about there. The astral light, subordinated to a blind mechanism and proceeding from arbitrary automatic centers, is a dead light and works mathematically following given impulsions or fatal flaws. The human light is fatal only to the ignorant in chance experiments. This is one of those things, right? You can use the light. That is something that I firmly stand upon. I give instructions on how to do it in several places. But you can harm yourself doing so. If you have the wrong intentionality, if you are not aligned correctly, or if you are simply just not giving it enough attention, you can harm yourself. I put warnings in my book. I give warnings all of the time about levels of responsibility and using things correctly for this reason, right? It is hard to hurt yourself, but it is not an impossibility. I believe that it is entirely possible that what happened to Nietzsche was a direct result of that, right? That is from the readings that we did. We read through Thus Spake Zarathustra in alignment with the introduction from his sister who let us know what happened to him. I believe that he was experimenting and that he was not correctly aligned because he had a bit of a victim mentality and had a tendency to be a little bit melancholy. And neither one of those two things are conducive to active, beneficial use of light. And so it is entirely possible that he opened up something and was unable to return. There are dangers associated with all of this. It's one of the reasons why I warn so hard in the book. Right there's the first couple of chapters is perfectly open. There is nothing inside of that can harm you. It tells you to correct yourself, to align yourself with God, to start exercising, and things along that nature. And then we get to the later chapters where we're talking about actually using this, and there are definitely warnings attached to that. You can use the light. You can harm yourself with the light, right? The light is neutral. It can be used for positive or negative. Your intentions determine that, and if they are not aligned correctly with the 8 laws of creation, it is going to reverberate. You will face consequences. There will be something consequential that comes from that. You should absolutely ensure every single time that you are in alignment with the divine before you attempt any manipulation of the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. Back to the text. The human light is fatal only to the ignorant in chance experiments. And see, that's partly right, because if you are aligned, then you are not ignorant. In the seer, it is subjected to intelligence, submitted to imagination, and dependent upon will. That is all true. This light, continually projected by the will, constitutes the personal atmospheres of Swedenborg. That would be the divine chakra. Right? You have 7 internal and you have 1 external, which you have access to if you are properly aligned, which encapsulates you. It is quite literally a sphere all the way around you. If you stick your hands out with your palm turned up like this, not out flat, but out like this, from this point right here, you draw a complete circle all the way around to the other side, and then down to your feet, right? That's this way. And then you do the circle in the exact same proportions, front and back. That is your divine chakra. You are encapsulated by it fully. You cannot extend yourself out of it. It extends from here out. Now, how far out it extends depends entirely upon you and your health and a variety of factors. But it is there. You can use it. We've even photographed it. The body absorbs what environs it and radiates perpetually by projecting its influences and invisible molecules. It is the same with the spirit, so that this phenomenon, by some mystics termed respiration, has really the influence, both physical and moral, which is assigned to it. It is undoubtedly contagious to breathe the same air as diseased persons, and to be within the circle of attraction and expansion which surrounds the wicked. That is mostly true, right? Respiration is a good way of looking at it, kind of, right? The spirit handles your breathing most of the time. You can take control of it, and right now you're probably thinking about it, but most of the time you don't think about breathing. It happens entirely upon its own. That is the spirit. You're absorbing the spirit. That is literally what you're taking in when you take a breath. You go, and you isolate a little bit of the spirit without into the spirit within, and then the spirit takes part of that spirit that you are isolating within yourself and distributes it to your fingers or your toes or your brain or wherever, right? The oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, all of the things that you absorb from the air into your body. That all happens. You can, through the use of your chakras, flex them. There is a outward flex and an inward flex for every single one of them, and that is kind of like respiration. If you are doing a negative flex, you are taking something within yourself or holding something within yourself. If you're doing a positive flex, you are expelling something from yourself or withholding something from yourself. Every single one of your chakras does that. Your base, and it's your butthole, right? It's around your butthole, and the muscles attached are the same ones. So if you're trying to pinch a turd, that's a negative flex. If you're trying to push one out, that's a positive flex. Now, I know that's a little bit crude. It's the exact same as breathing, right? It's the exact same process as going in and going out. The sacral is a forward and backwards flex. The solar plexus is an up and down, right? It alternates between them. There is rotation involved. There's a whole lot of things attached to it, which you need to know if you're going to be doing things. And once again, they are all described in my book with greater detail. So if you're interested in doing these things, I have an instruction manual. Back to the text. When the magnetic atmosphere of let's finish that, right? It is undoubtedly contagious to breathe the same air as diseased persons. Depends on the disease. You're not going to catch cancer from breathing. Depending on what you're breathing. But to be in the circle of attraction and expansion which surrounds the wicked, that is something that if you are properly aligned, you will know. You will walk up, like you ever had a gut check, right? You walk into a room and you see somebody over there, you've never seen them before in your life, but you're like, I don't know about that guy, right? That is a gut check. That is the spirit telling you something. You are in the presence of someone you do not align with. Now, that can have another effect too. You can walk in the room and you see someone, generally of the opposite sex, and you're like, ooh, right? That's another gut check. That is telling you that this person's probably aligned with you. That doesn't mean that you're going to be an absolute match, but it does mean that there may be, that it is a possibility, something that you can explore, right? Your gut feelings are quite literally your chakras interacting with each other and giving you warnings or signs to pay attention to. And some of those signs is this. When you walk into that room and you see that person and you're like, you know what, I don't need to be here. Listen to that. That is telling you you are in the circle of attraction and expansion which surrounds the wicked. If you are properly aligned. All right, now, back to the text. When the magnetic atmosphere of two persons is so equilibrated that the attractive faculty of one draws the expansive faculty of the other, a tendency is produced which is termed sympathy, then imagination, calling up to it all the rays or reflections analogous to that which it experiences, makes a poem of the desires which captivate the will, and, if the persons differ in sex, it occasions in them, or more commonly in the weaker of the two, a complete intoxication of their astral light, which is termed passion par excellence, or love. Love is one of the great instruments of magical power, but it is categorically forbidden to the magus, at least as an intoxication or a passion. That is true. Once again, you should do nothing without consent. Trying to influence love is absolutely doing something without consent and will absolutely reverberate upon you with negative consequences. If you are attempting to force someone to love you, you are doing life wrong. Also, love is the base, right? Your base chakra is in charge of the vice of wrath, but it is also in charge of the virtue of love. Those are the two sides of that particular coin. And so it is the first of the levels. It is the first thing that you should be clarifying, getting the balance between love and wrath together. It is, therefore, one of the great instruments of magical power. But so are the other 6 in each of the categories, right? You have 7 virtues, you have 7 vices. You are meant to balance them and walk between the pillars of Boaz and Yakin, right? Not clinging to either side, but instead walking freely through the middle thereof. Love is indeed one of the base level beginning steps. So absolutely, it is a great instrument of magical power, but it is categorically forbidden to you, no matter who you are, to do it. Now, if you to use that as an outside influence, right? You should balance it within yourself. You should seek love for yourself, from yourself first and foremost, and then outside love can follow. You should not put desire into anyone. It will absolutely reverberate. Back to the text. Woe to the Samson of the Kabbalah if he permit himself to be put asleep by Delilah, the Hercules of science, who exchanges his royal scepter for the distaff of Omphale, will soon experience the vengeance of Dajanira, and nothing will be left for him but the pyre of Mount Eta, in order to escape the devouring folds of the coat of Nessus. Sexual love is ever an illusion, for it is the result of an imaginary mirage. No, it's not. Right. If you have emotional love with your partner, it is not an imaginary mirage. Right? It is quite literally a real thing that really happens. And it is not even an illusion. Right? If you are properly aligned, if you are honest, open, and truthful with your partner, and they are with you, and you are both in accordance with each other, sexual love is not an illusion. It actually happens. Like this is lending into that I am better than you because I forsake sex. Right? That prideful mentality, that throat speaking out, I am better. Learn some humbleness. The astral light is the universal seducer, typified by the serpent of Genesis. This subtle agent, ever active, ever abounding in sap, ever fruitful in alluring dreams and sensuous images. This force, which by itself is blind and subordinated to every will, whether for good or evil. This ever-renewing circulus of unbridled life, which produces vertigo in the imprudent. This corporeal spirit, this fiery body, this impalpable, omnipresent ether, this monstrous seduction of nature. How shall we define it comprehensively, and how characterize its action? To some extent, indifferent in itself. It lends itself to good and evil. We've already talked about that. It transmits light and propagates darkness. It may be called equally Lucifer and Lucifuge. It is a serpent, but it is also an aureole. It is a fire, but it may belong equally to the torments of Infernus, or the sacrifice of incense offered up to heaven. To dispose of it, we must, like the predestined women, set our foot upon its head. In the elementary world, water corresponds to the Kabbalistic woman and fire to the serpent. To subdue the serpent, that is, to govern the circle of the astral light, we must place ourselves outside its currents. That is, we must isolate ourselves. For this reason, Apollonius of Tyana wrapped himself completely in a mantle of fine wool, setting his feet thereon and drawing it over his head. Then he bent his back in a semicircular fashion and closed his eyes after fulfilling certain rites, probably magnetic passes and sacramental words designed to fix the imagination and determine the action of the will. The woolen mantle is of great use in magic, and it was a common conveyance of sorcerers on their way to Sabbath, which proves that the sorcerers did not really go to the Sabbath, but the Sabbath came to the sorcerers when isolated in their mantle and conducted to their translucid images, analogous to their magical preoccupations, combined with reflections of all kindred acts previously accomplished in the world. Alright, we will hit this again too. There are ceremonies. Ceremonies can hold power if you are imbuing them with power, but none of them hold power in and of themselves. Not a single one of them. These tools, like we just talked about, they don't hold power either. This mantle, this woolen thing that people put on themselves, it is not powerful. It holds no power whatsoever, but you can use that tool to put you in the right mindset to attract the things which you are seeking. And that's what happens, right? We get into the first person understands this concept. And they put on the mantle to get themselves into the correct mindset. While the second person, through the game of telephone, doesn't quite understand what's going on, but he's imitating and he's still effective. And then you get farther down the line, and by the time you get to the fifth person, they have no idea that this is really about fixing your mindset. To them, the power is contained within the mantle. That is not true. The mantle has no power whatsoever. It reminds me of a story I heard years and years ago about these two sisters, and they were baking a cake, right? There was a birthday coming up, and they decided to bake a cake, and so they mix the cake up, and the one sister goes and puts the cake in the oven, which is preheated, and the other sister notices that she's got a pan on the bottom. And she's like, you know what? I remember Mama always putting that pan in there, but I don't remember why. And she was like, the other sister was like, well, I don't remember why either. I just did it because Mama did it. Let's call Mama and ask her. So they call their mom, and she's like, well, I don't know. My mom always did that too, and so I just do it. Well, then they call the grandmother, right? And they're like, why did you put the pan in the bottom of the oven? And she's like, well, because it was unleavened. and the pan held it level. The grandmother knew exactly why she used the tool. The mother didn't. The daughters even less. And so you can see the analogy, right? It's not the tool that has the power. The tool can help you get into the right mindset. It can help correct the conditions. But it holds no power in and of itself. It's simply a tool. That is true for all of these stones. That is true for any piece of clothing that you put upon yourself, and it is equally true for any of the ceremonies. We imbue the ceremonies with power, and therefore they become more binding than they should be. But that is because we are imbuing our life into it. We are committing ourselves in a marriage vow or a contract with business partners. We are committing our energy to it, and therefore it becomes binding. But unless we commit our energy to it, it's not binding. And you can see that every day in the divorce rates. Back to the text. This torrent of universal life is also represented in religious doctrines by the expiatory fire of hell, which does not exist. It is the instrument of initiation, the monster to be overcome, the enemy to subdue. It is this which brings to our evocations and to the conjuration of goetic magic swarms of larvae and phantoms. Therein are preserved all the forms by which, by their fantastic and fortuitous assemblage, people are nightmares with such abominable deformities. To allow ourselves to be sucked down by this whirling stream is to fall into the abysses of madness more frightful than those of death. To expel the darkness of this chaos and force it to give perfect forms to our thoughts. This is. To be a man of genius is to create. It is to be victorious over hell. It is to assimilate the virtues and the vices. That is to be victorious. There is no hell to be victorious over. The astral light directs the instincts of animals and offers battle to the intelligence of man, which it strives to pervert by the enticements of its reflections and the illusion of its images, a fatal and inevitable operation directed and made still more calamitous by the elementary spirits and suffering souls, whose restless wills seek out sympathies in our weakness and tempt us not so much to destroy us as to win friends for themselves. See the Necromonicon. That book of consciousnesses, which, according to Christian doctrine, shall be opened at the last day, is no other than the astral light, which preserves the impress of every logos, that is to say, of all actions and all forms. Our acts modify our magnetic respiration in such a way that a seer, meeting any person for the first time, can tell whether that person is innocent or criminal, and what are his virtues or his crimes. That is what we were talking about earlier, about being in that aura, right? That gut check. When you learn to trust that intuition, then you have this power. That is a true thing. I will stand on that one as well. That does not mean it cannot be deceived, right? There is nothing infallible, but for the most part, if you are correctly aligned, you will know right away, this person is not aligned with my values. This faculty, which belongs to divination, was called by the Christian mystics of the early church the discernment of spirits. Those who abdicate the empire of reason and delight to let their wills wander in pursuit of the reflections in the astral light are subject to alternations of mania and melancholy, see Nietzsche, which have originated all the marvels of demonical possession. Again, see Nietzsche. Though it is true, at the same time, that by means of these reflections impure spirits can act upon similar souls, make use of them as docile instruments, and even habitually torment their organism, wherein they enter and reside by obsession or embryonically. These Kabbalistic terms are explained in the Hebrew book of the Revolution of Souls, of which our 13th chapter will contain a succinct analysis. I am unfamiliar with the Hebrew book of the Revolution of Souls. It's probably Kabbalistic, and that's why. It is, therefore, extremely dangerous to make sport of the mysteries of magic. It is, therefore, extremely dangerous to make sport of the mysteries of magic. It is, therefore, extremely dangerous to make sport of the mysteries of magic. Again, 3 times for a reason. It is, above all, excessively rash to practice its rites from curiosity, by experiment, and as if to exploit higher forces. That is why we spend so much time talking about motivations, right? You will have curiosity as the beginning of it, but merely curiosity is not enough to carry you. And I tell you in my book, right, if you are not committed to this course of action, it is better for you to not begin it. A partial awakening of the energy can be detrimental. If you only awaken part of it and then you get scared, it will have reverberations. So you need to make sure that you are properly aligned before attempting anything at all, even curiously. The inquisitive, who, without being adepts, busy themselves with evocations or occult magnetism, are like children playing with fire in the neighborhood of a cask of gunpowder. Sooner or later, they will fall victims to some terrible explosion. And again, I refer you to Styx. To be isolated from the astral light is not enough to envelop oneself in a woolen fabric. We must also, and above all, impose absolute tranquility on mind and heart. That is true. We must have quitted the world of passions and be assured of perseverance in the spontaneous operations of an inflexible will. That is mostly true, right? Now, quitted is a big word, right? That is more about the assimilation if you are doing it correctly, right? That is, you can't ever have a drink. It is you are in control of your drinking. It is not that you cannot ever have sex. It is that you are in control of your sexual desires. It is not that you cannot eat food. It is that you are in control of the food that you eat. It is not that you don't have, what's 4? 4 is greed and charity. It is not that you don't have possessions. It is that you are not greedy, right? All the way up the line, there are virtues, there are vices. You are meant to balance them. And if you are balanced, then you can begin these things. Right. It does not matter that you put on a piece of woolen fabric. You must above all, impose this is meditation, right? When you enter into the meditative state, your mind is everywhere. It will take you time and dedication to achieve tranquility of mind and heart. But it is part of the meditative process and an intrinsic one to further yourself within it. Once you can impose tranquility on mind and heart, and absolute is a big word, but when you can do that, then you can begin exploring the pulling of the energies, right? I tell you, prayer is when you ask for things. It is when you talk to God. Fasting is preparing your body to receive the message that you're asking, right? You're asking questions, you're preparing yourself to hear. Meditation is you sitting in the tranquility of mind and heart and allowing that to come to you. It is not pulling the energies. It is not focusing your will. It is none of that. None of that is meditation. Meditation is the elimination of thought within yourself to achieve tranquility of mind and heart. That is intrinsic. If you are not doing that, you are doing it wrong. If you are pushing energy in a meditative state, you're praying. You're not meditating. That is not how it works. Once you are done with meditation, you have achieved tranquility of mind and heart, you have received your direction, then, and only then, should you be doing any pulling of the energy. And again, that is a warning that I give in my book, and I give it to you here for the exact same reason. Reverberations are real. Consequences are true. Be exceedingly careful before practicing any magical movements. And again, the quitted world of passions, that is about balance. It is not about exclusion. An inflexible will, you want things. Most of those things you will get. Right? If you are properly aligned, if you are asking for them with the correct motivations, you're going to get most of your things. You will manifest if you are aligned correctly and you're pulling the energy in the correct ways. Almost. Entirely. But there are things that you want that are no good for you. They are absolutely intrinsically bad for you. Right? You may be an alcoholic, you want to drink. That is bad for you. Right? You want things that are not necessarily good for you. 3 times. You should remain flexible enough to understand that fact. Sometimes the things that you desire are actually detrimental to your advancement, and therefore, if you are properly aligned, you will not manifest them. No matter how hard you try, if you are properly aligned with the will of God, if you are doing the things correctly, if you are asking for something that is not aligned with you, you will not receive it. That is something that you need to pay attention to, and this inflexible will is not a part of that. You should have faith that you will get the things which are aligned for you, absolutely. But be flexible enough to understand that you might not understand whether it is good for you or not. Back to the text. We must frequently reiterate the acts of this will, for, as we shall see in the introduction to the ritual, the will only assures itself by acts, as the power and perpetuity of religions depend on their rites and ceremonies. Let that one sit for a second. There are intoxicating substances, which, by increasing nervous sensibility, exalt the power and, consequently, the allurements of astral representations. By the same means, but pursuing a contrary course, spirits may be alarmed and disturbed. There are absolutely substances which can influence the use of magic. If you weren't paying attention to the update, I talked about this in it. I learned something new through my broken leg. I learned several things, but one of the things that I learned was painkillers cut you off from the source completely. I've been using this for a while, right? At least a year in the proper way, but longer than that in the improper way, which is why I had reverberations. And so, I am quite familiar with the ability to move the energy. I can do it like as easy as breathing these days. I can pull energy from the bottom and the top and meld them and do pretty much anything that I desire that is properly aligned. But recently I had a broken leg. That's one of them bottlenecks that was unavoidable, right? Things you want and things that you think don't necessarily work out the way that you want. Sometimes that is unavoidable, and that is what I call the bottlenecks. The broken leg was a bottleneck. And one of the things that I learned from it, I learned gratitude, right? I am so thankful for the people that have taken care of me. I've learned humbleness. I like to take care of myself, and it is really hard for me to allow someone to take care of me. And I learned that hydrocodone will cut you off from the ability to move any of the source. Like, I literally could not even feel the energies. I had zero ability whatsoever to alleviate my pain, which is something that I have been doing for 15 years subconsciously, right? Completely, like, I wasn't even able, like when the pain relievers were wearing off. Normally, I can dissipate that. I've been able to do that for at least a decade and a half, at least, to take that energy and dissipate it to where it is not as intense. That was not a possibility. It was not even something that I could start. I literally could not move any of the energy whatsoever. That was quite literally something that happened that I learned from this. Pain relievers apparently just take away the ability to do magic. But there are other things. There are substances out there that you can use, and they will help. The problem is, just like putting on the woolen mantle or doing the ceremonies or waving the wand, it holds the power not from itself. It just opens up the door a little bit wider for things that you can already do. You should not be opening doors with substances. Doesn't matter what the substance is. Whether it's weed, which is relatively safe, right? I use it on a daily basis when I'm not in a fasting situation. I've used it for years for pain relief, right? I don't when I'm going to meditate. I don't when I'm going to do any energy manipulation whatsoever, right? Now, there are times and situations where I've already partaken, and then a situation arises where I need to, right? There is something that needs to be remedied. And so I manipulate the power. You can feel it more, right? It is the exact opposite of the hydrocodone. The cannabis opens up the door a little bit. The problem being is that if you cannot already use the energy, if you cannot already open that door on your own, then you're not in control of it. You're not holding the power. The power is holding you. And that's just like being addicted. You should be able to do any of these things without any of the substances. And that includes hallucinogens. Now, I have undertaken a hallucinogenic experience. I've done mushrooms and it was wonderful. I went into it with the correct mindset. I experienced it with a safety and all of the things that are attached, right? And you should have somebody that is sober there with you in case things go bad. You should be in a safe environment. You should be, like, all of these things should be under control. And I did that, right? That door that opens, I can open that without it. Now, I didn't know that at the time. And so I did things wrong. I did it backwards. You can open that door of psychedelics, through your third eye, through the flexing of the muscle. That is something that I know is absolutely possible because I've done it. I can alter my state of consciousness willfully. I can do it right now. I'm not going to, but I can. I can flex the muscle and release the chemicals and see things. I don't do it regularly, but it is something that I could do at any point in time. You can do it too. It takes practice. It takes dedication. You have to go through the process and align yourself correctly, or it will wind up in a bad spot. And I do not recommend that you are driving or operating heavy machinery if you're going to flex your third eye. Back to the text. These substances, of themselves magnetic and further magnetized by the operators, are what people term filters and enchanted potions. But we shall not enter here upon this dangerous application of magic, which Cornelius Agrippa himself terms venomous magic. It is true that there are no longer pyres for sorcerers, but always, and more than ever, are there penalties dealt out to malefactors. See the 8 laws of creation. Let us confine ourselves, therefore, to stating, as the occasion offers, the reality of this power. To direct the astral light, we must understand also its double vibration, as well as the balance of forces termed magical equilibrium, and expressed in the Kabbalah by the Sinnery. Considered in its first cause, this equilibrium, or balance, is the will of God. It is liberty in man, and the mathematical equilibrium in matter. Equilibrium produces stability and duration. Liberty generates immortality of man and the will of God. Okay, I wasn't sure if y'all could see all of it, so these pages jump back and forth. And the will of God gives effect to the laws of eternal reason. Equilibrium in ideas is reason and enforces power. Equilibrium is exact, fulfill its law, and it is there. Violate it, however slightly, and it is destroyed. For this reason, nothing is useless or lost. Every utterance and every movement are for or against truth, which is composed of for or against, conciliated, or at least equilibrated. We shall state in the introduction to the ritual how magical equilibrium should be produced and why it is necessary to the success of all operations. Omnipotence is the most absolute liberty. Now, absolute liberty cannot exist apart from perfect equilibrium, or balance. Magical equilibrium is hence one of the first conditions of success in the operations of science, and must be sought even in occult chemistry, by learning to combine contraries without neutralizing them by one another. Magical equilibrium explains the great and primeval mystery of the existence and relative necessity of evil. As we have explained before, evil is a relative term. There are things that we call evil objectively, right? Killing someone, that's evil. Raping someone, that's evil. Stealing from someone, that can be kind of iffy. If you were stealing in order to feed yourself, that's kind of all right. If you were stealing to sell it, it's kind of not, right? There's a little bit of balance to be stricken there. Now, it is exceedingly difficult to say, I would never steal, right? I have been a thief before in my life. I have done that, and it was not with the intention of eating. So I was wrongfully aligned. But if I get into the point where it's to go into this field and take an apple to eat or to starve, I'm going to go in your field and take an apple. Hopefully I can go to you and you give me an apple. That's the premium outcome, but you may not be around and I'm going to die. So I'm going to take your apple. But if I go and I take 10 apples, that is theft on a different level. That is not trying to feed myself right now. Even taking to feed myself later is a problem, right? And so there's a little bit of problem between absolute evil for most things. There are things that are absolutely evil. Taking another person's life except in self-defense, evil, right? Forcing yourself upon another person, evil, every time. But some of the other things are a little bit iffy, right? The relative necessity of evil. Without the dark, there is no light. Without the evil, there is no good. They are relative to each other, intrinsic. They are coins. Just like the virtues and vices are coins, good and evil are coins. Absolute good is a thing. To love someone selflessly with no expectation of return, right? That is good. To hurt someone with no expectation of deserving, that is bad, right? Two sides of the same coin, love and wrath. Good and evil. Both are necessities. Without hardship, growth does not happen. If bad things don't happen to you, you don't learn from the bad things that happen. And so, we have bad things. But that doesn't necessarily make them evil, right? Evil is a relative term, reserved for the malfeasance of love, like the opposite, the living in wrath, right? The living in greed, the living in lust, right? All of those things, if that is your sole driving factor, is evil. You are not meant to cleave to that. But again, the abstaining of all of those is not necessarily good. You're supposed to be in the middle. Evil is a necessity. If you have a seed, the seed will not grow unless there is adversity. There has to be water completely surrounding it so that it absorbs it. It's kind of hard to breathe if you're underwater, but it is a necessity. Even packed in the earth, that soil has to be moist or there will be no germination. That is trial, right? Trial and evil, kind of an interchangeable term in this case. Without the sunlight, which can harm you, the plant cannot grow. Without rain, the plant cannot grow, but there is danger inherent in those. Without the tough circumstance, you don't grow, right? Even after the plant has come up, the wind blows and it's strong and it makes the plant move back and forth. It breaks little bitty fibers inside of the stalk and then they grow back stronger, right? The necessity of the evil of the wind, the trial, is a necessity. It is something that you need in order to get to the point where you can grow tall enough to compete and flower. Evil is relative. Some things are objectively evil, but most things are relatively evil. So there is a relative necessity of evil. So that is true, right? That's what I'm saying here. This relative necessity gives, in black magic, the measure of the power of demons or impure spirits, to whom virtues practiced on earth are a source of increased rage and apparently of increased power. At the epochs when saints and angels work miracles openly, sorcerers and fiends in their turn operate marvels and prodigies. Rivalry often creates success. We lean upon that which resists. And all of that is just a different way of saying what I just said, right? The necessity of evil is a real thing. I really thought we were going to do 2 chapters. This was a relatively short one, but I guess I had a lot to say. So hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand. I have some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. Discerning the true from the not, that is kind of why I'm here. I feel like I have explained myself well enough for all of these points, right? But if you need extra clarification, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above. Again, I absolutely do recommend that you check out, the fundamental harmonics of life's a little bit less necessary than I thought it was going to be, but there are definitely things in the Esoterica playlist and inside of the Infinite Integrations playlist where I talk about all of these things in much greater detail, right? And most of those things are my content. It's not me reading other people's stuff. It is me talking about these concepts in greater detail. It is important beyond the ability to state. You should be properly aligned before you attempt any part of the things that I talk about. I reiterate that so many times because it is so vitally important. There are so many videos where I've linked the 8 laws of creation in the corner because they are vitally important. And not understanding them, they're simple. They really are. They are physics with a philosophical lean. You can understand them, and if you do understand them, you can align yourself. You can check your intentions, right? Your intentions have to be aligned for betterment. If they are not, you are going to attract detriment. You have to be properly aligned. You have to check yourself with all 8 laws. Am I acting in accordance with the greater will of the Lord? Am I taking into account the positive and the negative? Do I understand the responses and what they will be? You don't. Right? All of these steps that you need to take to ensure that you are aligned correctly are vitally important. None of the tools are. Right? That is something that we are going to separate out of this, right? There is going to be a whole chapter on rituals. I'm going to piss all kinds of people off on that one, right? When we get to the Kabbalah, I'm going to piss all kinds of people off on that one. Tomorrow, I really thought we were doing something today, the septenary. I'm going to shit all over the number 7 tomorrow. Not in a bad way, but in a light breaking way, right? The number 7 is the wrong number. The number is 8. It is blatantly obvious. That's why I talked about the harmonics video. I thought that we were going to do 2 chapters. Discerning the difference between truth and fiction, that's kind of important. If you were going to be undertaking this work, this is real, right? I know. I sound crazy as hell, right? People look at me and they're like, what are you even talking about? I don't care. You can call me crazy. I am here. This channel is open for everyone. But I am not here for everyone. I am here for the select few who are actually looking for the truth. They want to enact change in their life through magical means. I am here to teach you that. I have a whole instruction manual. It is short. I have a series of videos. You have to pay for them, but it's like $5. Right? You can cancel after a month. It will not take a month to get through the videos. I promise you that. There's only 8 of them. Those 8 videos cover the entirety of this. It's less than 24, right at 25,000 words. You can get through it fairly simply in a single sitting. It takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours to read through the whole thing. You will not consume the whole thing in one sitting. You will not understand all of it in one sitting, but it is an instruction booklet, step by step, on how to do the things that I have actually achieved. I have changed my life. I have healed myself. I have affected things outside of myself. The warnings that I give you is because of the consequences I have faced. I do not say these things idly. I do not pull this out of my ass. I take responsibility for dispersing this to the entirety of the internet. You know how many not prepared people are out there? That's not my part. My part is to give it freely and as clearly as I possibly can. These studies are jumping off points. They bring up points, we talk about them so that we can clarify. People are following this book with no understanding that great chunks of it are wrong, right? We discussed several things that are just intrinsically wrong today. We did some yesterday. We will absolutely do some tomorrow, right? These things are real. You can do things with them, but you have to have correct information to make it work. And most of the information I am discovering is not correct. We have not come across a whole lot of meat in any of these studies, even this one so far. There's been goods, there's stuff in here you can pull value out of, but there's stuff in here that is probably intentionally misleading you. the ceremonial stuff in the Kabbalah is definitely being part of that. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. Whether you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there's another work you would like to see me discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.